the craziest strength thing you've seen from an athlete, not a power lifter. And it was this wide receiver. He weighed like 215 pounds. He came in the gym one day and the linemen were floor pressing. They were doing a fat bar, axle bar floor press. And they had 425 on the bar. They were like almost at the end of their sets. He comes in cold, hops on the floor, takes the bar down to his elbows, rest on the floor, pauses it, presses it, racks it.
Welcome to episode number 32. I am your host, Sebastian ENGSTROM. And today, Jacob Ross joins me for part 2. He is an elite level NBA, NFL, MLB, professional strength and conditioning coach. He runs his own company called Smart Strenght Customized Training, as well as he is, for the South Sudanese team, a strength and conditioning coach for the basketball team there. He is just a powerhouse of knowledge. We go into more in depth of training, specifics of how to train to get more explosive, powerful, different methodologies of it. And it's a very fascinating conversation. It's less, you can say, stories about his past and more about training as well as professional athletes, how they train and how he trained them. So enjoy this incredible episode with Jacob Ross. And if you haven't done so far, if you're enjoying the show, please, if you're on Apple, scroll down, hit 5 stars, and it'll be the good deed of the day. This helps us spread the message to more people. And I just want to say a personal thank you for doing this. If you're on another platform, hit subscribe, hit like, even write a review. This means the world. So thank you for doing so. And now, an uninterrupted podcast with Jacob Ross. Jacob Ross, we got you back on the podcast, elite strength coach, mastermind when it comes to performance of any type, form. Dude, amazing to have you on again.
Thank you for having me. We felt like we had more to talk about last time I was on. So we immediately obviously tried to make some plans to make it happen again. And here we are.
Yeah. I'm excited. And when we start talking about this stuff, and that's what I mean, we already, we chatted for 20 minutes and I realized, okay, well, time flies by when you're having fun. So let's jump into this topic that we we're just talking about. Like what does it take to be a strength coach and have longevity? What goes into, and what went into your career in that sense? We were talking about hours, we're talking about one-on-one clients. Yeah, give us an insight into that, and how long does a strength coach usually stay in the industry for?
Yeah, I would say for me particularly, there's strength coach is it's a continuum, right? Like it's a process. I think the first step in that process is what we talked about last time, like when I was in college, how to train anybody for free. You just need to get a lot of hands-on experience with a lot of different kind of people and athletes. I think the broader you can make that and the deeper you can make that experience, I think it just sets you up to be a better strength coach because you serve more different types of people and then you see more outcomes as a result of your methodology and your programming. And it just starts helping you prune away, what doesn't work, what does work, where you want to move towards, what you don't want to move towards. And you start to see similarities between certain types of athletes and people and, some things that don't cross over and it has to be specific to that sport or person. And the faster you can kind of create that well of knowledge, the more effective you become as a strength coach. And that's earlier in your career. We were talking about this earlier in that, like, that's really a young person's game, right? I mean, when I was 22, 23, for probably like 7 years, I was training Thanksgiving morning. Like I was training people, you know what I mean? Like, because there was a lot of families they're out of school and they're maybe have a workout culture in their family and like, hey, let's come in at 10 a.m. Thanksgiving morning and work out before, we have lunch and all that stuff. And somebody's got to train those people, right? Well, I couldn't imagine now. I mean, I could imagine it, I guess, but like, having 3 kids of my own, my wife has a large extended family, like being like, hey guys, like, I'll see you Thanksgiving afternoon. I mean, even in retail culture in America, stores are shutting down on Thanksgiving now. They're
Mm-hmm.
just not even open. Target, like a bunch of these larger stores, Kohl's, are like, we're just not even doing it. Like Black Friday will start on Friday. Like we're not even doing anything Thanksgiving night. And so you know, seeing that shift towards like family and being around your family, it's tough when as you get older and just your family connections become deeper, to like be comfortable and happy doing that. So that's just an example of a reality. And the other side of it is vacation. When you have 3 kids, you kind of have to line up your vacation around their school. When are they out of
Yeah.
school, as much as you can. When are those kind of traditional breaks within the school system that you can plan things. And if you're a trainer, and at one point, I was booked up for like 6 months in a row, like probably 10 hours a day. Well, if I decide I want to take a vacation, I mean, you're losing, let's just say a couple clients cancel on a given day. Let's say I'm losing 8 hours of clients a day for a week. I mean, that's a lot of money that you're losing because you want to go on vacation. And it kind of creates this downward pressure of like, should I really be taking a vacation? Should I just keep working? Your clients, even though I had incredible, really, like for the most part, really, really good clients, you also get to this place where they don't quite understand why you're taking a vacation. Like, even if they don't say it, it's like, well, I like to train and you train me. So why are you like leaving? It'd be like calling for somebody, for a haircut and then being like, no, like I can't do it. Like it's frustrating for people, I think.
Sure.
And when you're training a lot of people, you might get on a given week, half your clients who are like cool with it, and the other half are like, no, I'm really getting ready for this, or I had this goal in mind, I need you there. So it's tougher as you get older because life becomes inevitably more complicated
Yeah.
in a good way in terms of your time. It just becomes a difficult thing to do long term. And so, my advice for every young strength coach is the first part of it, which is train a lot of people, dig that well deeper of knowledge, experience, dig it wider as well, so that you can kind of cross over to a lot of different people and things. But then as you get older, like, start building a house next to that well that you could go in, shut the door,
Yeah.
have a nice hot tub, like something like that. So that you're not constantly going to that well of training for every single thing you do, because you can't ideally keep working for a place where you're trading your time directly for money. Because if I'm training someone one-on-one for an hour, that is my time for that hour. I can't do anything else. I can't answer an email. I can't multiply myself. I can't, market myself. I can't grow anything during that time other than my clients. Strength and conditioning, that's what I'm growing during that time. And that's great. But when you're stacking your whole day with that over and over and over, you're going to get to a place where you realize that your income is inevitably tied to your time of those people.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a 55-year-old like strength coach who works in that capacity. Usually, if you're an older strength coach, you work for a team. You're employed by a school. You're somehow working for like a hospital system. Like you have basically enough backup support to where your job isn't tied to that hourly. Am I training someone?
Yeah.
Your job is more of a overall theme. I'm looking after this program. I'm hiring people. I'm building this. Like, it's not purely training. And so you have to really make sure, I think, that you're leveraging all that towards that, and building something that's really scalable.
Yeah. So when it comes to methodology of training, that is something we didn't necessarily touch on too much. We chatted some back and forth about Olympic weightlifting, but what your specialty seems to be is powerlifting to a degree with Smart Strenght. But there's more to it. I mean, you coach professional teams and professional athletes. Like, what would you say your niche is, and do you have one? Like, what are your strengths?
I mean, I think every strength coach has a philosophy or tools that they gravitate towards. I've tried, I think, to take the attitude of whatever works is the right thing I should gravitate towards, and not get too caught up in what is X philosophy and like follow it until I die. Because I've seen so many strength coaches go down that road. And the problem with that road of, I think that this particular philosophy is the best and this is what everyone is going to do. The problem with that road is two-sided. One side of it is that you can't definitively prove it wrong, right? Because if you do anything hard enough with purpose and intensity in terms of physical exercise, you're going to get results. If I ask you, you say, hey, Jacob, I would really like to get leaner and lose a little bit of weight. I say, okay, I want you to put on a weighted backpack and I want you to go run a marathon every day, right? You would lose weight, you would get leaner. Now, is that the best thing for you to do? No. But if you really believe in it and for some reason that identifies with you, then you could always come back to me and say it worked.
Yeah.
And so it's a very low level argument, but it's a powerful argument because of the again, the issue with strength conditioning is you can see the results, right? You can physically see it, you can observe it very easily. So when someone sees any kind of a result, they equate that with effectiveness and optimization, and that's not true. Because the other side of it is, if I am following X philosophy or program, kind of till the ends of the earth, so to speak, then I'm doing a disservice to my clients because I'm serving myself. I'm serving what I want to do. I'm serving, what my prerogative is. And there's a difference between having expertise and serving your client in what you know is best versus serving what, I guess like kind of you have built your training identity around. And so to stop speaking in generic terms and like just practically speaking, I think it's a good segue into what you're talking about with Olympic lifting. Olympic lifting, it's changed a lot since I've started strength coaching. A lot since I've been strength coaching. And, I've been doing this professionally for, I don't know, 12, 14 years, somewhere in that range, depending on where you want to start it. But, I've been lifting for 21 years. And when I started, Olympic lifting in terms of strength conditioning was still a big deal. Every football team does, hang cleans and snatches and, squat cleans and, all this stuff. And then CrossFit started. And when CrossFit started, I think it pushed Olympic lifting back into popularity in a lot of ways, because now you need to be good at it. You needed to work on the skill, etc. I've trained 8 NFL Pro Bowlers. I've had Olympic medalists. I've had NBA All-Star. I've had MLB All-Stars. I've had tons of collegiate athletes who are really good at their various sports. And I've never done Olympic lifts in any of those people, not one single time.
Have they requested it?
The only time I've got it requested is when they have to do it in school. And they feel like they'll be behind if they're not doing it in the summer or, in whatever program they are with me when they go back to school, because they know that they're going to be tested on it. Right. And I think when you think about it like that, it starts to get really dumb in terms of the reason why you're doing it. Because again, we've all been a kid at some point, even if you don't have kids. And when you were a kid, at some point you were like learning something, like, why am I learning this? Well, because it's on the test. Well, is that really helpful? Like, this information, is it really furthering my life? Like, no, just learn it just learn the test. And you're like, okay, all right, I guess I will. But like with Olympic lifting, and I'm not anti-Olympic lifting.
No, please. What is your beef with Olympic lifting? Please share.
No. I'm not anti-Olympic lifting. If you want an Olympic lift, and that cranks your tractor, go for it. But you have to think about, why is Olympic lifting even popular? Okay. Well, because exercise physiology the culture was driven for a long time based on research, a very long time. And when you're doing research, what do you conduct research on? Things that are easily able to replicate. They're the same. Okay. Well, a barbell is the same. Plates are the same, right? Across the world. So if I'm in a lab in Sweden or I'm a lab in the US, it doesn't matter. A barbell is a barbell, a plate is a plate, a snatch is a snatch, a clean is a clean. It's very easy to replicate what those things are. And again, you think back 50 years ago, there wasn't all the devices and exercise equipment and these different tools and modalities that we have now. It was, dumbbells and barbells, and, Arthur Jones was starting to crank out a couple of machines at Nautilus, and like, that was it. Like, there wasn't a ton of stuff like there is now. So you didn't really have a lot of options either. But if you boil it down to, okay, well, why am I Olympic lifting as an athlete? If I'm an NFL player, like Matt Forte was one of my guys I trained, multiple Pro Bowler, led the league in yards from scrimmage for several years, one of the best running backs, of his generation for sure. Okay, well, Matt had at one point torn his tricep off the bone. He had separated a shoulder. His wrists stuff were always hurt because he's stiff arming people. So if he comes in and says, and I'm saying, hey, Matt, we need to, man, we got to clean today, buddy. We got to keep you explosive. And he's like, Jacob, I can't physically bend my wrist. Like, it's been fused together. My tricep is off the bone. I can't get into this position. Yeah. If my job, it's what we talked about earlier, if I'm so dogmatic about my belief in Olympic lifting, that's my answer, I've now done a disservice to my client because it's not what's best for him. So that's part of it. If you've ever trained with real athletes, not people who are just like, doing this for like weekend warrior stuff, the amount of injuries that these people take from contact, just a result of their sport, puts you in a place where Olympic lifting isn't the best outcome. So from there, you take another logical step and say, okay, well, why do we Olympic lift? To train explosiveness. Okay, well, is the idea of a snatch or a clean, is that responsible for the explosiveness? Does your body really know what a barbell and like an Olympic clean is? Or is it just doing the motion? And is the motion, in fact, responsible for it? And the research is really clear. The research says that triple extension, so movements that act at the hip, knee, and ankle, are what's responsible for helping increase power. So if that's the case, then the barbell now just becomes one of many modalities that I can utilize to get that triple extension, right? A box jump would also do it. A med ball throw, triple extension. Med ball overhead slam, triple extension. Flip a tire, triple extension. Push a sled, triple extension. There's a lot of ways that I can get triple extension. And within the last, probably 8 years, the research has started to shift towards exploring some of these other modalities. And what they found is that they would look at groups of people who would only vertically power lift, and in terms not like powerlifting, but like Olympic lifts. Yeah. And because any clean snatch is on the vertical plane, versus people who would do sled work, tire work that it has a horizontal component as well. And those athletes always got faster, jumped higher than the people who only perform vertically, because every sport in the world is a horizontal component to it. There's no sport in the world where you stand in one place and jump straight up and down. It doesn't exist. Right. You have to run right, left, forwards, backwards, whatever the case may be. So if there's better options, I can take it. Let's say I take an athlete. Let's go back down to like the kid level, a 12-year-old kid. They come in my gym and they want to get more powerful. Okay. Do I need to put them on a piece of PVC pipe and teach, front rack position and go through, my first pull, my second pull? Do I need to do that for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and then progress them to like a 20-pound bar, or a 15-kilo bar, and then slow, or could I say, here's an appropriate size tire for you, weighs 90 pounds, flip the tire. He goes, oh, okay. They just bend down and flip it. It takes hardly any coaching. Yeah. So not only can I literally start training them right away, I can actually train them more effectively according to the research. So when you start adding those things up, or a med ball slam, hey, pick it up on your toes, slam it down. Box jump on the box. Like if I can simplify their training to a way that the research actually shows is actually more effective, then for the athlete, that's a win. And if now me as a coach, if I was raised up under a guy who really believed in Olympic lifting, or a woman who really believed in Olympic lifting, and that's my philosophy, that's my prerogative, I love Olympic lifting, then by me forcing that athlete to go down that road, am I doing them a service, or am I doing myself a service? Right. And these are the questions that I think a lot of strength and conditioning coaches are not asking themselves. They're just blindly following, and it doesn't have to be Olympic lifting. Let's take powerlifting, right? Okay, you mentioned powerlifting. So there's a lot of strength coaches, especially in football, US football culture, where they think that their athletes need to power lift. So, they squat, they bench, etc. Well, is a low bar, straight bar, barbell squat the best thing for someone's shoulder and wrists? I pose the same question as
Yeah.
Olympic lifting. I
Yeah.
would say no. As someone who trained a lot of NFL players, over 100
Mhm.
really good NFL players, we did not straight bar, low bar squat. We didn't do it. We
Mhm.
would use the safety squat bar.
Mhm.
Because why? Why do I need to have them in this, arms back, locked in, 500-600 pounds, like pushing on their shoulders, or put them in a safety squat bar? There's no shoulder mobility restrictions there.
Mhm.
You're still squatting, you're still working, posterior chain, you're still getting the same motion. It's just a lot safer and easier to get into.
Mhm.
And now, same thing with deadlift. We would very rarely pull a straight bar conventional deadlift from the floor. Again, why? If you're a football player, you need to be strong for football. You need to be strong for powerlifting. So if I can do a trap bar deadlift and we get a similar effect, or a rack pull, or a wagon wheel deadlift, or a block pull, like there's so many ways that are safer to get these responses for an athlete than to go with quote unquote like traditional powerlifting. And again, my job as a strength coach is to serve my clients, not myself. So I might like to powerlift personally. That's fine. But that doesn't mean that every single athlete that I train needs to power lift.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long response.
I think that's perfect. No, I really appreciate that. What would be your top exercises for to create explosiveness in an athlete?
Somewhat depends on the age, I think. But in general, I think sled work is highly, highly undervalued.
Mhm.
Pushing sleds, pulling sleds. You can do sled cleans. I posted that before on Instagram.
Sled cleans. Huh.
Yeah, you got to see it. It's kind of hard to explain. But like, thing about a sled work is it's always dynamic, right? It's always movement based, and there's no eccentrics in it. Zero, right? Aside from whenever your foot hits the turf and that little bit of like stretch reflex, but like most soreness happens when training from eccentrics. And eccentrics aren't a bad thing. I use a lot of tempo work. But when I'm talking about training athletes and I need to get somebody ready for a game or performance, if I can minimize eccentrics and still train, then I'm doing them a service because I'm not beating them up as much. So sled work, when you step forward, there's a little bit of stretch reflex, but then as soon as you push, it's a concentric push. And when your leg is in a recovery phase, there's no eccentric there, right? Your leg isn't doing any work. It's not like a squat where you're lowering the weight down. So I think sleds are such an important way to train power, but also to stay powerful even in season as you're preparing for performances in games. Because if you're in shape, it doesn't cost the athlete a lot to continue to do those things. And again, I'm not talking about running somebody into the ground with sleds like we're doing sled sprints. I'm talking like planned, methodical, power sets of sled work. So again, for example, I trained my athletes under a conjugate style system. Now, I don't mean conjugate like westside barbell, because again, we just talked about like we didn't necessarily power lift. So like, for instance, for us on a max lower day, I think athletes need heavy stimulus if they play American football. I mean, if you're talking about a 260-pound man running, 4.640 running into another 220-pound person, there's a lot of force involved. You have to prepare your tissue for that. So there is some heavy lifting that needs to be done, but you need to do it as safely as possible. And like one thing we would do is we'd have the prowler, right, which is like, kind of the triangle sled with the post on either side. And say, okay, today for our max effort, we're going to load the prowler up. What's the heaviest weight you can push for 10 yards? What is that? So they push it 10 yards. If they did it, great. We throw 2 plates on. Do it again. 2 plates on. That's heavy stimulus, right? It's not loading them up with like a low bar squat where I'm crushing their shoulders and their neck and everything else. So there's ways of going about it, modifying these things to serve your purpose. So I think sled work is great. I think for a lot of younger athletes, I think med ball work is also undervalued. Med ball slams, med ball throws, split stance, med ball slams, med ball throws into the wall. It's again, minimal or zero eccentric on those things. It's scalable easily. You can get a 4-pound med ball up to, the heaviest med ball I've ever seen is a 200-pound med ball. We used to have one for our NFL guys, and they would break it because, they're strong enough to throw it, but just the weight of 200-pound med ball slamming on the over and over and over. Like eventually it would break, but
Yeah.
we just ordered like 4 a year, and that's just part of the cost of doing business. But I think med balls are highly undervalued. I think band work is highly undervalued. You know, band work forces over speed eccentrics. It forces you to speed up through that eccentric motion. So if you're talking about a banded squat, or, you know, even just like a banded row, like you don't even need weight, right? Bands you can tie on anything. It's a great way to train power. And another thing about bands is this: it flips the force curve. I don't know if you want to get into this or not, but like
Go ahead.
normally if you're squatting and you're going with free weight, right? As you go down, the weight gets harder, the lower you go. As you stand up, the higher you go, the easier it gets. That's a normal force curve for any lift under the sun. That's gravity, right? Unless you're on a machine and for some reason the physics have been flipped. Well, if you're add bands to it, now the opposite is true. As you go down, the band shrinks, which means the weight actually gets lighter. And as you stand up, the band stretches, it means it gets heavier. And if I'm talking about an athlete and all we ever do is free weight, is they stand up and the weight gets easier, they have to slow down. You have to. You're going to blow your kneecaps out if you finish your squat at the same speed that you came out of the hole with, right? You slow down as you kind of come to that end. So you're teaching your nervous system to slow down as it's finishing its extension, which is not optimal when you're talking about that. That's a spot where sprinting happens. That's a spot where running happens when you finish that extension, right? So if you throw bands on it, now I flipped it. I'm teaching them to actually increase the amount of force as they're getting towards the finishing that extension, which is what you want to be most powerful right at that point when they push off of the turf or the court or whatever the case would be. And then also just safety. If people usually don't miss a squat at the top, they miss in the hole, right? So if you're talking about athletes, not powerlifting, then why wouldn't I put my athletes in position to be the load is lightest in the hole and heaviest when it's safest? So there's just so many aspects of this that I think a lot of strength coaches, I don't want to just knock people and say they don't think through it like they're dumb or unintelligent. I think some of this you have to train. It goes back to what we said at the beginning. You have to train enough people to have experienced these problems, right? And then based on those experiences and those issues, you now formulate solutions. And so if you don't have the experience with enough people, you haven't ran into enough problems. And if you haven't ran into enough problems, how can you have the answers? Why would you have the answers? If all you've ever sat down for a math test is, 1 + 1, then why do you need to know anything else? You don't need to. And so I think the experience piece of it is key. But bands, sleds, med balls, I think those are great tools for any athlete, especially younger athletes. And then as you get older, I would say in terms of training power, specialty bars that change how the weight is hitting your joints, so you can continue to train at the appropriate, intensity and weight for your sport, but not compromise, your joints. Because again, we're training movement patterns of muscles. So if you can use a multi-grip bar, some people call it a football bar or whatever, as opposed to a straight bar bench. Straight bar flat bench is probably one of the worst things you can do for your body. And I don't mean that like you shouldn't do it. I'm not one of those people like, oh, you should never do this. It's not that. It's just I'm around some of the best powerlifters in the world, and it's just not optimal. Your pec. It's funny when you talk to people, they don't understand like pec anatomy and like what does it actually do. Your pec is a triangle muscle, and it literally brings your arm right from your side down to your body, right? Like adduction. Like that's literally what it does. So a bench press on a flat is nothing to do with that motion. Hardly anything actually. So I always tell people too, and if anybody's watching this on video, they'll crack up about this. But like when you run with your arms by your side. You don't run with your arms up here, like this. But that's how you bench. So like this isn't comfortable or natural in any way, shape, or form. This is. So your arms are by your side, you can get into that, like a multi-grip bar allows you to do that. That's how your shoulder likes to slide. That's how you like to move through that motion. So again, if you're not powerlifting, if you're not training for a sport, the outcome has to match the training, right? If I'm powerlifting, you got a straight bar bench, got a straight bar squat, have to do those things. Even that, you can be smart about too, but you have to do those things. If you're an NFL player or a basketball player, or an MLB player. Why do you have to do those things in a certain way? I think the answer should be what's best for the athlete, and that's the way you should approach it.
We can get into a lot of fun topics like the combine and bench press test, how many reps you can do, and that should be a testament to how strong you are. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the bench press. I'll just tell you that, even though I have okay numbers, I've worked my way up to it, but that's the exercise that has injured me the most out of any exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It is so freaking detrimental. I mean, and you just spoke to the movement pattern and why. But yeah, there is this unfortunate culture of that if you're a man, you should be able to bench press a lot of weight. And it's pretty much, yeah, you're going to wreck your body in one point or another because it's going to break you down. So
Well,
glad,
and
yeah.
I want to say, like, the thing that I've tried to help younger lifters understand now that I'm a little bit older is look at professional strongmen, right?
Mm-hmm.
These guys can log press, 200 kilos, some of these guys. And if you can log press, 200 kilos, 440 pounds, whatever that works out to be, what do you think you can bench press? 500 pounds, 600 pounds, easily, because your shoulders are so freaking strong.
Yeah.
So I've told people I don't think I've ever seen someone get injured from an overhead press. I don't think I've ever seen it in my entire life. I don't think I've known anybody to do it. I've seen people with hurt shoulders from sport who can't overhead press, but I've never seen someone get injured from overhead pressing.
Right.
I've seen a lot of people get injured from bench pressing. I've seen pecs tear. I've rehabbed our buddy Huck Finn. He's torn both pecs off.
Ooh.
I rehabbed the second one, and I've hurt my pec bench pressing before, powerlifting. And to your point, some people would maybe counter with, well, you shouldn't be going heavy on it. And it's like, well, if the sport is powerlifting, you really don't have a choice.
Yes.
That is the sport. And also to your point, I've done a lot of heavy squats, done a lot of heavy deadlifts, and I've never significantly injured myself doing those things.
Right.
Again, not that it's not possible. It's all about mitigating risk.
Sure.
And just the risk of the movement is just going to be higher for a bench press.
Yeah. You mentioned conjugate style training, but I don't think you really went into what's your approach to that?
Yeah. I've been to Westside Barbell. I went for 2 or 3 days with a friend of mine who used to train there in the 80s. And it's cool because, you can't just show up to Westside. You have to be invited, or you have to reach out and kind of plan it. They don't like people just showing up. It's a private gym. And so I was able to go, which is really cool because I went, was it 3 years ago now? Louie's getting up there in age. I don't, he's almost died a couple of times in his life. So maybe he'll live to be, 150, but you just have to think practically and say, maybe the guy isn't going to make it forever. So
sure.
I wanted to go see him in person because I think he's one of the, most intelligent strength coaches, within our time for sure.
Yep.
Now, Louie would be the first person to tell you, he said it many times, he has adopted the original conjugate style of training and modified it and optimized it for what Westside Barbell does. But the definition of conjugate training isn't Westside Barbell. They've become synonymous because Louie is so influential and so popular, and he's so opinionated that it's hard for a lot of people to disassociate those two things. But they're not the same thing. Conjugate is a methodology of training, and Westside Barbell is his application of that methodology, right? So for me, I have my own application of it. I do believe that conjugate is a lot smarter method of training than kind of Western linear periodization. Linear periodization, again, if you're not dogmatic in your belief and you're willing to think through this, is really, really dumb way of training, again, when you've trained high level athletes. Because if I have, let's take Matt Forte again, okay? Matt Forte retired from the NFL at 32, I think. All right, so when he was 28, 27, 26, he'd been in the league 3 or 4 years at that point. They're drafting and bringing in running backs that are 3 or 4 years younger than him every single year. And that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now they're 5 years younger than him. Now they're 7 years younger than him, right?
Yep.
Your clock is ticking, buddy.
Yep.
So when you go into mini camp, when is it appropriate for Matt Forte not to be fast in mini camp? Even in February, right after the season, March. Like, when is it appropriate for him not to be fast? It doesn't exist. There's not a time.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing linear periodization and I say, you know what, February through April, we're going to just do strength. By definition of focusing on one thing, I'm not focusing on other things. I'm not focusing on speed. I'm not focusing on, some people would say agility. There's a lot of different things you can quote unquote program. So for them, I'm doing him a disservice by not working on his speed year round.
Yeah.
I'm doing him a disservice by emphasizing one thing to the point that I'm de-emphasizing other things, because that's not a professional athlete. Being a professional athlete is being at your best and working towards that continuously. And when your job is literally on the line every single year and they're literally hiring your replacement every single year underneath you, people don't understand that. They don't work in those kind of environments. You can't go to a place where I'm saying, you know what, we're going to show up to mini camp not in great shape. We're just going to be really strong. The coach is going to say, what's wrong with you? You're so fat. You're slow.
Yeah.
And then the conversations go right up to the GM. Well, Matt's not looking so good. I don't know what's going on with this guy. They want you, and whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's reality. They want you to look the same in March as they do in summer, as they do on kickoff. They want you to look the same, because that gives them confidence that you can be the same year after year after year. And if you can do that, you can make a lot of money. And if you can't do that, they're just going to replace you, because there's literally thousands of people who want your job and are coming out of college every year looking for your job. So the thing I like about conjugate is you work on everything within a week. You work on dynamic effort, which is speed, power work. You work on maximal effort strength. You work on hypertrophy. My stuff always included like prehab, every single bit of it, which you could get into mobility and all this kind of stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So my system would combine all those things to work in it within a week, actually 4 days. And that's how I trained. Because again, another problem with westernized like linear periodization is the amount of time it takes. So again, working with high level athletes, if I have a guy for 6 weeks right after the season, then they have to go to mini camp for a week. And then their wife says, hey, we need to take the kids on vacation. They go away for another week, and then they come back to me. So 6 weeks with me, 2 weeks away, they come back. And I had them going from a strength phase into a power phase. Well, now they've missed 2 weeks. So where do I go from there? Like, do I go back? Do I restart the phase? Does it, some people say, oh, you just go right into the next one. Well, then do the phases really matter then? If I could just willy-nilly jump into it? Like that westernized periodization really works best for sports like Olympic lifting, powerlifting, to some extent sprinters, where you have complete control for 12, 16 weeks, right? Some collegiate programs where you have to be there, you don't have a choice, like those things make sense. For a professional athlete, a conjugate model is what makes sense. I think for a developing athlete, a conjugate model is what makes sense, because they need to be working on everything. If you're 14, 15, 16, I don't need to be emphasizing one thing over the other. I need to be developing the entire athlete and putting them in a position to do so. And I would still argue that even if you had control for somebody over, 16-week period, that I think conjugate has its upsides. And if you really like drill down and look at some of the better performing teams, like Clemson's been, crazy good football team for a long time.
Yeah.
They train conjugate. Alabama, and what's funny, this is my favorite thing. There's always, everybody trains conjugate at some point if you do strength work, everybody. I've been around long enough now to see powerlifters and other athletes say, oh, I don't believe in bands, I don't believe in chains and this. And then 5, 6 years later, they're using boxes, they're using chains, they're using slingshots, which is a band. They're varying their methods to get a different outcome. And that's conjugate. Conjugate is saying that I'm going to use whatever tools are at my disposal to work on everything. And people always come around to it because, Louie Simmons says this, I don't want to take credit for it. He's like, the weights aren't going to change. You have to get smarter than they are. The weight's always going to be the weight, right? So at some point, that weight is going to beat you. It's going to. And you have to figure out, how can I be smarter than the weights are? How can I outsmart the weights? What could I be doing for my body? to get better than I was before. And it's, usually doing the same thing over and over and over in strength training, you get to a place where it does work for a while, but then you start to see performance, decrease, et cetera, et cetera. And basic exercise physiology tells you this, principle of specificity, et cetera. But people still, for some reason, try to cheat that and like find a workaround around it. But anyway, sorry again, long answer.
No, dude, this is why you're here. Please keep after it. When it comes to fueling your body for this, actually, before we go into fueling your body, when we go into rest, when we go into workout duration, are you a fan of, I mean, Westside, for example, have like you rest 1 minute between each set. Like, I like that style. I've adopted that style. Tom and I spoke to it as well. Like, yeah, put a majority of your exercises before the big lift, not the other way around. And it's not your traditional approach. And I'm completely with that. I've done that for years myself. What is your approach to a regular session, and also rest in that session, as well as a weekly structure? Like, you like a specific, you're a fan of, like, for example, CrossFit has 3 days on, 1 off, 2 days on, 1 off. Like, what are your thoughts, philosophy on this?
Well, first of all, I'd love to know what CrossFit athletes you're talking to, because I don't know anybody that follows that.
Really? I mean, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, or like Thursday sometimes. Like, yeah, go ahead.
Every CrossFit athlete I know is Monday through Saturday, and if you can beg them to stop on Sunday, maybe occasionally they will, so that they can go do another activity, like flag football or something.
Yeah.
Like CrossFit is the definition of overtraining.
Right.
When I was at EFT, the gym that I used to run, we did a crossover event during NFL Combine every year, and the crossover event was really cool. Progenics, which was one of our sponsors, they would fly in the top CrossFit athletes, and they would train side by side for like 4 days with our NFL Combine athletes. It was super cool. And so, I got to train literally at that time, the best CrossFitters in the world. And I got to see actually in person, what are they really doing? Because I've always been curious, right? Like, what are they really doing? Both men and women, they sent both. And, oh man, I got to remember the guy's name. Is it Ben Smith?
Yeah.
Who won the games that 1 year?
At one point. Yeah.
Yeah, he won it once, right?
Yep.
So yeah, him, his brother Dane, his brother Alec, they all came. Okay. Noah Olson came, a couple other guys. And anyway, so like the thing that I found fascinating about Ben was he was a strategy-based exercise person. So when I would train my NFL guys and we're training for, 40-yard dash, it's an intensity-based thing. We're not going to be doing reps forever. We actually are going to take even longer breaks than that, because we're trying to maximize power and speed for sprinting. So you have to give all out, and then you have to take like a break and then give all out again.
Sure.
Right. And then when we would set up our circuits, we would kind of encourage a similar style, even if the rests were timed for a minute or two. We would still encourage like all out effort, because again, NFL football play, when is it appropriate to give half effort? Like, it doesn't exist. You give your all for 5, 6, 7 plays if you're lucky, and then it's someone else's turn. So that's just how it works, right? It's like hockey. You go out and skate your shift. You don't halfway skate it. You full skate it, and you get off, and someone else goes on. Well, Ben would never give what I would say 100% all out effort, because he knew in his mind, I've still got another hour workout left, and I'm going to work out again in the middle of the day, and I'm going to work out again at night. And like, Ben was fascinating because the strategy that he utilized to get through his days so that he was consistently working at a high effort was unmatched. I don't think I've ever seen that from someone else. And I think that's why he won the games. I think he won the games because he wasn't necessarily the best at everything. He was consistently the best, right? And like, that was, I think, his calling card as an athlete. Nobody ever said that this guy was the strongest or the fastest or the whatever. He was just really consistent every single event. And that year, that won it for him. He wasn't, I wouldn't say he was dominant like a Rich Froning was. Like, Rich Froning was dominant, right? So So, but the point being is like, when it comes to rest intervals, it's always based on, what the outcome is for the athlete. So if you're CrossFit and your competition is going to be 5 or 6 events over 3 days or 3 or 2 days, then you do have to kind of overtrain. You do have to, your training frequency has to go up.
Mhm.
Now, if you're a smart coach, you're programming in such a way that you're waiving what I would call your waving intensity throughout your week. So you have a high Metcon day. You maybe have a low strength day where you're not getting your heart rate up hardly at all. It's just pure strength work. You might have a skill work day where you're doing some of your skill work. And then obviously you have to blend those things to mimic the workouts that are going to be done.
Mhm.
But you're waiving your intensity throughout the week. Some days are high intensity, some days are low. And you're creating a plan that allows for somewhat of recovery within your week while you're working out,
Yep.
right? Another example of that would be, how we train our powerlifting athletes at Smart Strenght. We do 3-week waves, which is similar to what Westside does, where, we do a certain percentage in volume week 1, week 2, the weight goes up, the volume goes down a little. Week 3, the weight goes way up, the volume goes down. But then we reset the wave on week 4. So week 4 starts back over.
Yes.
We drop the weight down again and we increase the volume. So we're waving. So when you do that, you're deloading every 3 weeks,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't need to take like a quote unquote, like quote unquote, like, I guess classic deload where you just sit around for like a week. So I think with CrossFit, it has to be a similar thing when you're training in that style where you're waiving your intensity because you can't afford to just really sit.
Mhm.
And again, the issue with CrossFit is the same issue that we talked about from the very beginning. It's such a good question that you asked, is that a lot of CrossFit coaches don't have enough experience training lots of different kinds of people and the outcomes associated with that. So they're trying to implement the sport without necessarily understanding the outcome of what they're implementing yet. And by the time that athlete has gotten to that point, usually they're burnout. I mean, CrossFit, they used to, I haven't looked at the numbers like this year, but they usually have the highest rate of incidence of any kind of strength training exercise in terms of injury rate.
Sure.
And it's because, it's because the frequency of the training and the style of lifting. I mean, you're asking people, you are a calisthenics expert, you are a gymnastics expert, I'd say you're an Olympic expert, right?
Right.
You understand more than most people that you could pick one of those things, just one, study it your whole life,
Mhm.
and maybe be good enough to call yourself an expert, right?
Sure.
Like gymnastics. I mean, gymnastics, like you can't just say, I'm going to halfway do gymnastics.
Right.
Olympic lifting, the best Olympic lifters in the world, they do it their whole life and maybe they can say they're the best, right?
Yes.
Gymnastics. I mean, we all see the Olympics. Like, how many times do you see somebody you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, and then their score is like a 7 out of 10. You're like, how is that a 7? They're like, well, you haven't seen this person. Like, it's just so hard to be the best at that. And we all seen the stories too, especially in the US, like Simone Biles, like how much she trained as a kid, like how much she still trains, and to maintain that and the effect that it has on you. CrossFit, you're saying, I'm going to take those 3 things and combine them into one workout, and I'm going to ask you to go, at a high intensity for those things. It's just a recipe for, something to go wrong. And so that's why I'm not the biggest fan of it for a sport. Now, in terms of training, I would be hypocrite if I didn't say I like the variation of it, because I do.
Yeah.
I do. I just think the idea of CrossFit, I love a lot. I just think, again, what we talked about at the beginning, when you have some people who are really dogmatic to what I would call like the old school style CrossFit, versus people now who are, I think, a lot smarter with their training. They're using other implements. You're not necessarily, doing a snatch or clean every day. You might be doing a kettlebell snatch, right? Or a dumbbell snatch. That didn't happen 10 years ago.
Mhm.
It really didn't. Sleds, like that stuff didn't exist in CrossFit really that much 10 years ago. You're seeing like air bikes and ski ergs, and like all this stuff is like utilized at such a higher rate than it used to be.
Right.
Because you need ways of varying your training and keeping intensity. So, rest intervals, like, within your workout or even within your week, it all depends on the outcome. If you're training power, it's pretty simple. You want to have as many powerful reps as possible to practice that skill. So, more rest. Like at Westside, you talking about the minute rest that they take. I've seen
Mhm.
those guys lift. It's insane.
Mm.
When they're doing their dynamic squats, they might have 300 pounds of band on the bar, anywhere between 300 and 500 pounds of straight weight. And there's 4 guys. One guy's running the mono, 2 guys are spotting, and 1 guy's lifting. As soon as that guy racks the bar, the guy who's on the right side of the mono gets ready to lift. The guy who was running it moves over, loads the weight. The guy who just got done lifting moves over, loads the weight on the other side. And the guy who was spotting on the left runs the mono on the right. They literally, like, it's like a machine. It's insane. They all know the person's weight and what their job is for that.
Yeah.
And they literally lift, if you're an individual lifter, almost every minute on the minute.
Wow.
And these guys are doing speed squats with, at the top, it feels like 800 or 900 pounds. Speed squats up and down. So, like, Louie Simmons has said many times, like, you have to be in good enough shape to do this training. Because, again, if you're really picking apart what I said, you could say that, wait a second, Jay, if you just said if you're training for power, you need to have as much rest as possible to be powerful, but yet you're saying that Westside does 1 minute breaks, which is probably not enough rest. If you're in shape for it, it's enough rest. If you're not in shape for it, it's not enough rest.
Right.
So how much rest should you get? Well, you should get what's appropriate for you. Right? So, like, if you came to me for the first time to train, I would probably give you longer rest breaks because I don't know where you're at, and I would err on the side of caution. As you get in better shape and you know more and more about what I'm expecting from you, we can train you to a place where a minute rest seems like a really long time to you. Again, it just depends on your outcomes and the athlete and what you're trying to work for.
Yeah. So going into habits that aid high performance, and part of that is fuel. So let's start with fuel. So food. What is your take on food for athletes? And we'll go into stories on that because I know there's a lot of good ones you probably have.
I'd say I'm a bad person to ask because I've been blessed to be in situations where I've seen the best athletes in the world. And rarely, very rarely, is their nutrition on par with their athleticism.
Right.
Very rare that those things are equated. I would say this. I would say that fueling yourself properly, eating leaner proteins, eating, good sources of carbohydrates, mix of complex and simple, getting vegetables that don't mess with your stomach. I think that's important. Some people just eat vegetables because they see it on Instagram and some influencers doing it. And, they're like literally like farting up a storm, crop dusting people right and left. And they're still like, oh, give me more of it because it's good for me. It's like, no, your body doesn't really react well with that. Find a different vegetable.
Thank you.
Like a lot of people, yeah, like a lot of people don't respond well with broccoli, well, eat spinach. I mean, come on, like what's the trade-off there, right? Like spinach is easy on your stomach, broccoli is not for most people. So, there's never a downside to doing that. I would say that the more athletic you are, the better your training is, the less important that is to your outcome. Because I've seen guys who literally drink orange juice and eat Starburst for breakfast. I've seen them come in the gym, do 1.5 to 2 hour workouts, squatting the world, sprinting, jumping. They're 4 or 5% body fat. They played long, healthy NFL careers. They didn't have a high risk of injury. None of that stuff. I've seen that several times. Yeah. But they're so gifted athletically that I don't think it would matter. Even me as a coach, I don't think I'd like transform them athletically. I think I just guided them athletically, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
like they're going to be great athletes regardless of what I do. My goal is not to get in their way. It's just to kind of guide them the right way. Then there's been athletes that I've trained who I would say, yeah, like I probably made them a good athlete because they were not athletic. Those people, they have to focus harder on their food. They have to focus harder on how they're fueling. Now, in a perfect world, even your high, naturally gifted athletic people are also eating well. But it's very rare that happens. Yes. Because if you're not good at something, you're going to do everything you can to be good at it, right? If you're already good at something, then your thought is, why why do I need to change? If I've been eating Starburst and orange juice for breakfast, then why does it matter?
Yeah.
I'm doing just fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to argue with that logic. Now, Derrick Rose is a really good example, right? Derrick Rose was the youngest MVP in NBA history. He played with Lou, so I know some of this stuff, like, for a fact. Derrick's like pregame meal used to be like McDonald's, he'd eat Skittles. He didn't really lift, because from Derrick's standpoint, he wasn't like anti-lifting or anti-working. It wasn't anything like that. But from Derrick's standpoint, because Lou used to tell him, like, hey, you got to, like, clean this up. Well, why? I was the best basketball player since I've been literally like a little kid. I was best in high school, best in college, literally the best in the NBA at 21 years old, literally MVP.
Yeah.
Nobody's better than me. What do I need to change for? Right? He's not wrong. Guy was MVP. Well, until he had an injury. And I think that's where you start to see those little things add up. I think that's where you start to see the nutrition matter. I think that's where you start to see your training matter more, because it took him a very long time to get somewhat back to where he used to be from that injury, much longer than most athletes. But I think it's because he didn't train a lot and his diet wasn't great. He had to learn those things. Now, if you fast forward to when we were in Minnesota,
he never really came back to the same again, though. That's the interesting part.
No. But like, you fast forward to when we were in Minnesota, Derrick was also on that team with Lou and Timberwolves. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Derrick literally travels with a medicine ball under his arm. Literally. He has a special medicine ball. It's like his thing. And when he goes on the private plane, he's carrying it. He has his bag in one hand, his medicine ball underneath his arm. He literally doesn't go anywhere without it. The guy trains all the time now. Like, he trains like a nut. He eats healthy and does everything. And if you followed his career, a little bit, you'll see, like, he's on the Knicks now. The guy's playing 26, 28 minutes a night. And he's considered a really good player even still. He's closing out games for them. The Knicks are a good team. Like, it goes to show you how much the training and nutrition can help someone, even an athlete that good. It just, for him, I think it took him an injury for him to really understand it. And that's unfortunate. Like, in a perfect world, you just figure those things out. Michael Jordan, everybody watched The Last Dance. I mean, the guy smoking a cigar the whole time. He didn't pick that up after training. I mean, after basketball, right? The guy smoked, by all accounts, would party like most professional athletes do. Like, Michael Jordan was undeniably the greatest player of his generation, in my opinion, all time. We don't have to have that debate, but the guy was smoking cigars and drinking, like, for some athletes, I'm just talking like weekend warriors who are like uber into whatever sport they're into, whether it's powerlifting or CrossFit or triathlons or whatever it is. They'd be like, oh, you can't do that. And it's like, Michael Jordan did it. How can you deny his athleticism? Like, it all is on this continuum of, what is your natural gift, and then how much are you willing to quote unquote like sacrifice to push that a little bit further. If you're a really good athlete, and your nutrition is perfect, you might push yourself 1 or 2% further. And if you're a really good athlete, that's a lot, right? But if you're not as good of an athlete, your nutrition might push you 10, 15, 20% further. And people always say, like, abs are made in the kitchen. Oh my gosh, that's such BS. I can't tell you how many people I've seen with abs who literally show up with bags of McDonald's wings. Like, they have 12 packs. Like, it's abs in your body fat is a lot to do with what your genetic hand is dealt. And the worse that genetic hand is in terms of like body composition, the more that it matters. That's actually the right way to say it. Again, this one guy I know, he played in the NFL as a wide receiver. Somebody asked me this on Instagram, like, what's the most athletic thing or the craziest strength thing you've seen from an athlete, not a power lifter? And it was this wide receiver. He weighed like 215 pounds. He walked in the gym one day. Oh, no, not anymore. Goodness gracious. These guys nowadays, like DJ Metcalf, he's like 235, 240, 6'4", 6'5". Like, that's becoming the norm now. Like, the little guys are phasing out. But Landon, his name was Landon Cox. He came in the gym one day and the linemen were floor pressing. They were doing a fat bar, axle bar floor press. And they had 415, 425 on the bar. They were like almost at the end of their sets. He comes in cold, hops on the floor, takes the bar down to his elbows, rest on the floor, pauses it, presses it, racks it. Right? The guy's 215 pounds.
Mhm.
He decided after his NFL career, he wanted to do a physique show. Okay. My wife, Alicia, obviously Ross, but used to be Harris. She won 6 at the Olympia twice in figure. She's one of the best, best built women in the world.
Mhm.
She said, yeah, like, I'll help you coach. I'll coach you for whatever. And because we're, you're all friends and what, no problem. We said, well, when is it? He said, oh, it's in 3 weeks.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. And this show was an NPC show, which is like the largest feeder organization to IFBB. And this show in the Midwest is one of the largest amateur shows in the country. He
Yeah.
wanted to do it in 3 weeks. So, okay, we'll try our best. Now, the guy walks around with like 4% body fat. Seriously, like legitimately like 4% body fat.
Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
So we trained him for 3 weeks. He dieted okay. It wasn't even
Uh,
a great 3 weeks. It was okay. He got second. One of the biggest shows in the country.
wow. Wow.
I
Yeah.
can't, you can't coach that. Like
No.
those are the stories that people don't see. Those are the stories that people don't, they don't want to see, because in some way it like dashes your hopes of like being that, right? Because you're like, oh gosh, I could never do that as a normal person. And I would say that's not true. I would say, quote unquote, the more normal you are, meaning just like the more kind of like less athletic genetics you have, or less body combat, whatever it is. I just say the harder you have to work in those different things, the smarter you have to be about those things.
And then your abs are made in the kitchen to a degree. Yeah, that is applicable.
Then
But
it
yeah,
is true.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
For sure. Then it is true.
Yeah.
And it's similar thing. People say, when they want to start training, how many days a week should I work out? Well, first of all, what is your goal? Second of all, how quickly do you want to get there?
Mhm.
If you want to get there in a year, we could probably work out 3 days a week. If you want to get there in 6 weeks, we're probably going to work out 6 days a week.
Yeah.
NFL combine training, for example, was 6 days a week for six to 8 weeks, because those guys were in such terrible shape coming out of football. Football is not like a great shape sport, right? Like you're beat up, you're hurt, you're only, if you're a good player, you're playing what, maybe 40 snaps a game, right? Like that's not a ton of volume. Like so your cardio isn't great. Like we're trying to change them from that into literally like world-class track athletes in like 6 or 8 weeks. Like the combine is insane. So we train 6 days a week, but that's all they do. Literally, that's all they do. They eat, sleep, train. That's it. So yeah, we need that condensed timeline to make that happen. So it's a similar thing with food. If you want to be, certain body composition, certain goal, that's great. How serious you need to be about it depends on how far out that goal is and how quickly do you want to get there. Because a lot of people don't want to admit this, but if they would just be consistent with their food, they'd be a lot closer to their goals, right? But people want to go extreme. They want to go to this fad diet. They want to go to this crazy plan, because you get hyped on extreme. Oh, I'm doing this cool thing. I'm working with this cool coach, or, blah, blah, blah. And it fuels that need to change it. But the truth is, if consistently you're making good choices over your whole life, you're never super far out of the goals you want to be. Doesn't mean you don't swing. Life happens, things change. You swing up or down, whatever way you want to go, but you should be somewhat close with your goals if you've been consistent. And consistency is key.
So to lock in your nutrition, your fuel as just as good as you can, are there any specific approach that you take? I mean, there are many, I've tried several myself. I mean, keto is more and more popular, even carnivore to a degree, intermittent fasting. There is low carb. I mean, you have vegan, vegetarian. I growing up in a ranch, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be a topic to discuss. Maybe you have an opinion on it. Well, actually, please share. Like, what would you? Is it just fuel your body, eat clean? Is it simple? What is it? Organic?
Yeah, I mean, well, the
free
research,
range?
the research shows that a lot of these strategies, low carb, intermittent fasting, they're not necessarily more effective than another in terms of long-term outcomes, which is, I think, one of the most important things to look at. Anybody can lose weight in, 3-4 months, but long-term outcomes are important. So let me give you one thing, and then I'll give you my opinion. There's a study when I was in college that we read about, where they followed people over 10 years who wanted to lose weight. Okay. 10 years is a long time. It's a long, think the 10 years back going in your life, like where you are, like whoever's listening to this, like that's a long time.
Yeah.
All right. So 95% of people over that 10 years who lost weight and kept it off, that's a key point, right? They didn't just lose it over that time, they kept it off. 95% of them worked out at least 4 days a week, right? So if you want to think about that stat, that means 5% of people lost weight and kept it off by working out 3 days or less,
Mm-hmm.
which also means that 5% of people did it through diet alone.
Mm-hmm.
Has to,
Yep.
right?
Right.
They did it. 95% of people did it in conjunction with an
Yep.
active, healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And remember, for the purpose of the study, exercise means like planned activity, not like I went and walked my dog, like actual planned, measured activity. That's exercise and research, right? So your success rate isn't tied to what you do in the kitchen; it's tied to your physical activity.
Yep.
And when it comes to your nutrition, I would say like whatever plan works well for you. Some people like intermittent fasting because they don't have to think about intermittent fasting, right? They just say, hey, I'm going to get up. I'm a busy person. I have some coffee maybe. I don't doctor it up with a ton of sugar and cream. I just kind of have it black or whatever. And I start my day. And then before I know it, it's 11 or 12 and I can eat. It's great. I love that. Okay, good. If that works well for you and your lifestyle, then go for it. Some people like low carb. Hey, it's just easier for me if like chips aren't an option. It's easier for me if desserts are they're just not an option.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, go for it. There's no data that shows that one of those things are inherently better than the other, aside from what works well with your lifestyle, which I would argue is the most important, thing. When it comes to like organics, the labels of that stuff is a whole nother, you literally need a degree to explain those labels, right? Like you need to be a registered dietitian to understand what does organic actually mean in a given country, because there's different rules. And free range and cage free, like all those things have very specific rules on what they actually mean. Don't.
Right.
I would say if you're eating fresh food, then that is better than processed food.
Yes.
Whether it was organic or cage free or whatever the case may be, doesn't matter. Fresh food is always going to be your best option. Some people, are on this like, they think that somehow like going to the grocery store and buying a piece of chicken, is worse for you because it's been quote unquote processed than if you go to like your local butcher. And I would say, well, your local butcher is probably fresher for sure. But every food is processed. It's been processed since the beginning of time. Like, do you not think that people who farmed hundreds of years ago, if they had a really strong crop one year, they wouldn't keep those seeds and then replant those seeds the next year and not something else? Like they're growing towards, that's you're processing and growing food towards a certain play. You have to, people used to kill, their animals around this time of year, right? They put them up in a barn, they throw a bunch of salt on them and leave them outside hanging up from us. That's processed with a ton of sodium. You know what I mean? And people are like, oh, you can't have this, you can't have that. Yes, you can. Like, relax, okay? The thing is,
let's put it more like this. I'd say in a can or in a bag. Those are, I mean, more so in a can, but especially in like if they're wrapped up in some plastic, like, okay, yeah. That's like if it's a meat product or some type of vegetable or fruit or so forth. But if it's bagged up and it has a long shelf life, yeah, that's when it's like, all right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And the other stuff, like, kind of just go as it makes sense to you. If you don't, if you have unlimited budget and you want to buy the organic, these animals were able to run in a 10,000 acre forest, like, go for it. Right? If you're not able to do that, like, please don't stress about it. The nutritional difference is, according to the research, pretty much non-existent. Now, in terms of like being vegan, it's real simple to me. If being vegan is an ethical thing for you, go for it. Go for it. Go crazy. If it's anything other than that, the research doesn't support it, especially if you're an athlete, right? So, to get the amount of protein you would need as an athlete from being vegan, the amount of volume of food that you have to consume is literally inhuman. You cannot eat enough beans, lentils, variety of things. You cannot fill your stomach up. It's not big enough to get the amount of protein you need. You have to supplement it. And a lot of people choose like vegan whey proteins and stuff, which is great. No problem with that. But to sit here and say that somehow optimizes your performance, it's just incorrect. And the literature supports it. There's been some documentaries over the last few years of people who come out and said, that being vegan, like, it was great for them. And what's funny is that all those people, none of them are saying it in the prime of their career. They're all saying it after the fact. I've retired and now I'm vegan and I feel great. Well, okay, let's just think about what feeling great means. Like, you know, Arnold was obviously a big sponsor behind that documentary. And it's like, okay, Arnold says he feels great. Well, Arnold is also on the record of saying like he would eat a whole chicken and drink a beer after every workout, right? You know, and Arnold was training 2 a day, 6 days a week. Like, if I'm training, and it's funny, is Luwal's house used to be across. I used to see Arnold's house from Luwal's house. Arnold gets up in the morning, he rides his bike downhill, not uphill. His security team follows him. He goes to Gold's Gym when he's in California, and he goes and does a circuit, you know, around Gold's Gym, just a little circuit, you know, talks to some people, goes back home. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't you think that's easier on your body than what he used to do, which is bodybuilding, 2 hour workouts twice a day, 4 hours a day? Like, of course you're going to feel better. Like, you know, you see some of these other athletes, like UFC fighters and stuff, like, oh, I feel better. Well, of course you feel better. You're not getting your head beat in every day. You know, like I'm all for people finding what's right for them. I'm all for it. But if we're going to have a logical, scientific discussion about what's optimal for athletes, then we have to have it. And the science says athletes need protein to recover. They have to have it. There is no complete vegan protein. It doesn't exist. Animal protein, any animal protein is complete, has a complete amino acid profile. There is no vegetable that has a complete amino acid profile. You have to be really smart about how you mix different things. And another example is, I won't name the guy's name, but Luwal was a teammate with a guy who went vegan during the season. And the guy lost like 17 pounds, and most basketball players don't have 17 pounds to lose.
Nope.
He literally, sometimes at halftime, would be kneeling on the floor at his locker because he couldn't stand up.
Jesus.
And Luwal came over to him and said, what's going on with you? He said, oh, I just, you know, before the game, I had like some celery, and like Lou's like, dude, you got to get a chef. Like, you have to get someone who's like a nutritionist and a chef. Like, what to play professional basketball and to live this lifestyle, like, that's cool if you want to do it, but you have to have an incredible plan and team together to making sure that you're fueling yourself properly. Because you know, animal proteins are just complete in a lot of different ways in terms of nutrition, things that you can't get from something else, right? And I'm not on the carnivore side either. I'm not on this, like, you know, somehow, I don't know if you've seen this guy on Instagram. Have you seen this Liver King guy yet?
Oh, it sounds so familiar. Please.
I'll have to send it to you if you haven't. It's this guy who is clearly on PEDs, like clearly on PEDs. I've been, again, my wife was in the world of bodybuilding for a long time. I was around a lot of these guys. I know what it looks like when someone's on versus when they're not, right? Clearly the guy's on PEDs, and he's eating like raw, like bull testicles. He's eating raw, like liver, like just literally like raw meat. And just like, and he's like, it's so good. This is all you need to do. We need to go back to how it used to be. And it's like, oh, you mean when the average age of life was like 38? Like, we need to go back to that because of disease and foodborne illness? Like, really, that's what we need to go back to? So like, don't get me wrong, I'm not like so pro meat that I'm like, you know, those people are goober heads too. The point is our stomachs and our metabolism was built to handle a variety of foods, right? Another thing in that documentary is they have this one doctor on there who's like, look at gorillas. They don't eat meat. Look how strong they are. Oh my gosh. Like, do you think our physiology is the same as a gorilla? Like, I had cows, you know, cows have multiple stomachs. That's how come they can eat the way that they eat. The point is, we were designed to eat a multitude of foods, and we were designed to get nutrients from different sources: fruits, vegetables, grains, you know, meats, etc. So like, once you have your ethics sorted out in your head in terms of like where you fall on that stand, and I'll never, you know, knock somebody for their ethical approach to that. If they really believe in their heart, you know, you shouldn't kill an animal for food, like, okay, like, that's fine. You know, but if you're talking about performance, you can't deny that we need this amount of nutrients. There's a literally entire field of research on it. We need this amount of nutrients for optimal performance. Okay. The most efficient, effective way to get so is to eat a balance of everything, not to eat completely like shun one sort of food group. So if you can live in that pocket, I think that you're going to make good decisions. If you're, you know, we had some guys on the South Sudanese team who were vegan when we were doing Afrobasket, probably 3 or 4 guys. I told them, it's fine, but you guys got to eat a ton of food, ton of food. Because
don't be around me because I don't want to smell your farts too.
No, I just like, like, dude, you have to eat so much because they were already on the lighter side of what's
Yeah,
considered acceptable for a professional athlete.
right.
And I'm like, I'm cool if you guys want to do it. Like, they had some ethical thing, like, it's fine, but like, you don't understand. I think it's not like you can just say I'm going to eat the same amount of food that I used to eat when I ate, like, meat, because meat, aside from the protein content, there's usually just a natural amount of fats that occur with that as well, right?
I
Which
mean,
also,
yeah.
just kind of boosts your calories.
LeBron did it at 1.2. I mean, and there are photos. You can Google that, LeBron vegan or vegetarian, and you can see how he's losing weight and how he's becoming pale, how his skin is worse, his hair is worse. My wife has tried it. There's so many anecdotal stories that I've come across and people that I know. It's always the same thing. Always they drop in energy, drop in focus. Is great initially because it cleans out their system, and then shit hits the fan. But what I was going to say with this, one thing that I just want to point out, if you're thinking about how you want to optimize, I agree with everything that you're saying, but also Google inflammatory foods. Just do me that favor. If you listen to this, Google inflammatory foods and be cautious on those, or be cautious on if it's processed, or if it's one of those high inflammatory foods. There's a reason why you might get irritated and you don't even know that you're irritated, or that you are tired, you get sick all the time, or that you have trouble with your stomach. So just check that out
Well,
as an additional point.
yeah, well, and I'll just give you some real experience on that particularly. Um, we live in a world now where you can be from one area of the world and live in another, right? That didn't exist really even 50 years ago. People weren't really doing that on a large
Right.
scale. Pretty much wherever you were born is where you live. And as a result, you can't forget that your genetics are tuned to a certain region.
Yes.
So Lual, for example, being from South Sudan, okay, he lived in America for, well, still does, let's see here. He came over when he was 14, so 21, 22 years at this point. His genetics, his stomach is built for food in East Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That's what his heritage is. That's where his family lineage is. That's where it's from. So there are certain foods his body does not do well with in America. He gets bloated. To your point about like the inflammation side of it, like, yeah, he maybe doesn't recover as well. He doesn't feel as well.
Yes.
And it was a process for us to go through and figure out what those things were. Now, he had the advantage of having a chef where we could say, do this, don't do that, right? Yeah. But the point that you're making is an important one. You have to think about what works well with your body and what doesn't. It's that simple. Yeah. It's finding things that work well with your body and eliminate the things that don't. Don't, again, it's like the training. Don't be so dogmatic about a given approach or thing that you exclude optimal choices. Right. Find what works for you and then harp in on those things. And if it's not working for you, continue to search until you find what does. And, hopefully you land in a good spot with it.
I was going to say Rick Ross, Jacob Ross. I was just talking about Rick Ross with another guy the other day. Anyway, it's been amazing having you on round two. It's always easy. It feels like we leave plenty in the tank. So, but thank you for this round. It's been freaking phenomenal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am always happy to hop on, and clearly I have no shortage of wanting to talk about this stuff. So, hey, we do it again sometime too if there's more need for it. If the people want it, we'll make it happen.
I love it. Thanks again. Jacob is really one of those incredibly humble people, but knows so much about training and his trait, how to connect with people and how to elevate people. It's a rare capability to function at such a high level and execute on a day-to-day basis and still caring about your family and being there for everyone that matters so much around you. So great deed of respect to Jacob. And for you who have listened, if you enjoyed us, please scroll down on Apple, hit the 5 stars. It takes you literally 5 seconds. I truly appreciate you doing this. This helps us spread the message. So thank you for this favor. And if you haven't done so on the other platform, hit subscribe, hit like, even leave a review. This takes you 5 seconds. A review takes you maybe 30 seconds, a minute. And I truly appreciate it. It makes you feel good too, because you're helping someone and you're helping spread a message that hopefully has helped you as well. So thank you again for tuning in, and sending you much love, and see you next time.